With Academy Awards season now behind us, movie fans everywhere are gearing up for cinema's next big event. This time, it's watching the good Hollywood Ryan embark on a sci-fi adventure brought to you by the creative minds behind the Spider-Verse films with the cinematographer from Dune and the Batman. And there's quite a bit of extra hype around this, as the book it's based on is much beloved. Seriously, I personally know so many people who've read this thing, and I feel like every critic on YouTube has read it too. Me, I haven't read the book.
I never learned to read!
So I was going into Project Hail Mary completely blind. Although afterwards, I did talk to a few friends who did read it, and they sort of gave me the rundown on what the differences were. All I knew headed into this thing was that it was centered on a guy who's literally me, embarking on an intergalactic quest to save the universe while forging an unlikely friendship with an alien. Together, the two use the power of science to learn how to communicate, all the while working against the clock to save both of their worlds before it's too late. Now, in that synopsis I gave, I didn't mention anything that wasn't already featured in the trailers, but when I saw that first teaser drop, I remember hearing all of the book fans complain that it showed a bit too much of where the story went. And after watching the movie, I kinda see where they were coming from. Project Hail Mary is sort of separated into different parts. I won't get into too specific with the way it's structured, but needless to say, there was a significant portion of the film where the character Ryland Grace is by himself having to figure things out. And that solo act of a scientist having to solve a series of space-related problems is what I was more or less expecting with Project Hail Mary, much like this writer's other story, The Martian, where Matt Damon gets left behind again, but this time on Mars. But while there were definitely shades of The Martian here with some of the plot elements, this film is completely its own thing, and in my opinion, rises above it with a solid emotional core that I wasn't expecting. To put it simply, Project Hail Mary is fantastic. Directors Phil Lord and Chris Miller have taken this story about friendship and science and have brought it to life with spectacular visuals, a career best performance from Gosling, hard-hitting emotional moments, and the best live-action direction of their careers. And that's not to say their other flicks aren't as good. In fact, I still prefer Across the Spider-Verse as an overall personal favorite, but also keep in mind they didn't actually direct those flicks, so that's a real Nightmare Before Christmas scenario. But I digress. I just can't wrap my mind around how I would even attempt to go about planning out a production of this scale, from the larger space sequences to even just the way the camera work follows Gosling as he moves through the ship's interiors. There's this great trick where the shot will open up tilted with Gosling's character as he wakes up and the camera slowly follows his perspective as it rotates. The movie's loaded with interesting visual language like that. And speaking of visuals, Greg Fraser's cinematography here is absolutely goated, with so much color just oozing off the screen. The trailers had only a taste of the dazzling spectacle that my eyeballs just beheld. And if you're a longtime viewer of this channel, and if you're not, then please subscribe, then you know how I always harp on how ugly modern blockbusters are becoming. Most of these things look like gray concrete at this point, but Project Hail Mary has come around to remind us that there is an entire wheel to use. Fraser really is a master at the art. I still can't believe he was poached from both Dune 3 and The Batman Part 2 to make 4 Beatles movies. There's so much injustice in the world. And as I said earlier, I do think this is the best performance of Gosling's career. Although my personal favorite performance will always be from The Nice Guys, the way he was able to channel Lou Costello still blows my mind. Here he's asked to do a lot, and there was a significant portion of the film focused entirely on him. Having to juggle the bulk of the story's emotions is no small feat, from the elements of humor to the more weighty emotional beats, all while interacting with numerous CGI visuals. I'm not going to say he's a shoo-in for Best Actor win next year, but he should at least be nominated. Now, unlike The Martian, this movie doesn't really have the most expansive supporting cast. Sandra Hüller is great for what she was given. At first I thought her government official character was a bit underwritten, but then she's given a standout scene involving karaoke that really hammered home her true feelings about things, and her more stoic demeanor was good in balancing out Gosling's more humor-driven performance in those scenes where they were together. I'll discuss those certain sequences in a bit. But of the limited supporting cast, the most important character was of course Rocky. Rocky is the alien who he befriends on the ship, and the filmmakers used an actual physical puppet instead of purely CGI, which I think was a stroke of genius. I can only imagine how difficult it was to maneuver this little guy, but it paid off in spades. The friendship Grace has with Rocky is the heart of the movie, and if this dynamic didn't work, then the movie wouldn't work. Lots of Project Hail Mary's themes hinge on the way these two characters connect, and might I say, provided a few tear-jerking moments that I was referring to earlier. Now, I'm not saying I was bawling at this thing like I was during the Iron Claw, but there were a few tears on the level of Home Alone. In my head, that equation makes sense. But I would say it's these emotional moments that sort of lead to one of the movie's issues, and that was the way it balanced these harder hitting scenes with the more comedic elements. I understand that a story with these kind of high stakes needs humor to anchor it, but there were times where the jokes were a bit too much for me, especially when some of the story's reveals that were meant to have more of a dramatic impact ended up getting undercut by a quip. And again, without getting into too heavy with specific details, the movie shifts back and forth to the past a few times, and when those transitions happened, they would sometimes jump from a jaw-dropping and emotional sequence to another scene full of jokes. I think that a majority of the humor did land, at least with me it did. This wasn't like a bullet train situation where the jokes completely ruined the plot, but I'm just saying it got to be a bit overwhelming at times. I have seen some people complain about the film's length, but overall I think that the longer running time allowed for those more emotional moments that I mentioned to breathe. A common complaint I've made from some recent blockbusters is that they always feel like a minimum of 30 minutes has been removed, with certain scenes feeling that they were cut off a bit too shortly. This is most definitely not the case here, though I will say Project Hail Mary does suffer a bit from what I call Return of the King syndrome, where it feels like it ends 3 times. That certainly does lessen the impact of what felt like a big climactic conclusion, but overall I left the actual ending feeling satisfied. Project Hail Mary is a resounding success. While the film isn't perfect, and I did find a few issues with its tone and scene placement, this is why we go to the movies. Also, not to get too heavy, but a lot of this film's more hopeful themes really connected with me. With a lot of these sci-fi tales, you run the risk of getting lost in the sauce, so to speak, but I found a lot in Project Hail Mary to enjoy, complete with heart, humor, spectacle, and of course, the Gosling. This film is not something you want to miss. Go see it before the internet says it's overrated crap, like they always do. I'm gonna give Project Hail Mary an A-.